Welcome to the Australian Business Executive Podcast, where we speak with Australia's most influential industry professionals on the business and economic development issues taking place across the country. You can stay up to date with all our content, including our magazines, podcasts and videos by visiting www.theabe.com.au and clicking on subscribe.
Today's guest is Brett Piggott, Executive Director of Willis Temby Insurance Brokers. Brett has held an Executive Director position since 2000. This shadows 10 earlier years in senior underwriting and business relationship management positions with a number of high-profile insurance companies across Australia. Willis Temby Insurance Brokers has established a market-leading presence in the specialized area of general insurance. They take on their role as industry custodians with pride, with an underlying purpose to educate, advocate, and inspire confidence. Brett, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse.
So give us an overview of Willis Temby Insurance Brokers and your services.
Willis Temby Insurance Brokers was established in 1984. It's a privately owned company. We specialise in commercial and corporate complex risks, and predominantly by referral only. Not to say we won't take business outside of that, but it's predominantly referral only. The services that we provide span Australia, but also we look after overseas placements for global corporate entities.
And so how did you get into the industry yourself?
Well, I'm a country boy, Jess, from down at southwest of Western Australia. And in my teens, I was a fairly aspirational individual and identified a career in financial services, and made the exerted effort to get into the industry. So back in that, I started with a general insurer, and at that time, I was too young to work out at the time, though, that was a period of my employment where I first experienced mentorship, and it was a life-changing impact that I had. And through that journey, I expanded through to the east coast of Australia. Transferred there by national general insurers, and then returning back into Western Australia, where in 2000, at the age of 30, I was provided an opportunity to acquire part ownership of Willis Temby Insurance Brokers, and through that I felt it was just a great opportunity to take on. And a lot of it at the time was I was a little bit over by working for the shareholder as a national insurer, and really wanted to give back to and protect the consumer and provide some advisory services where I felt a little bit more job satisfaction out of providing these services for the consumer.
Okay. And do you want to talk a little bit about, your specialized or key areas of insurance that you cover?
Yeah, it's most general insurance brokers provide coverage of across a broad spectrum of industries and also product lines. Here at Willis Temby, even though we do that, we do specialise in the sectors of financial risk, which is very similar to which include professional indemnity and directors and officers liability insurance. Liability risks, which everyone would know, public and products liability insurance, and particularly on the basis that most businesses would carry that form of insurance. And then we do step into a very specialised sector, which is maritime risks, which is the commercial hull and protection and indemnity insurance. So this is when there's vessels out on the open water and the liabilities attached to the use of those vessels. And it's all those risks or specialised insurance risks carry their own levels of complexity and the inherent exposures that require really an expert advisory service provided to ensure that the protection is there for the client.
Okay, interesting. I was going to ask if you service all industry sectors, and you've already started talking about how you've got a little bit of specialization in maritime. What are the other areas, first of all, that you service, and what are some of the issues surrounding those sectors and how you've kind of become specialized with them?
Yeah, it was some years ago in early 2000, there was clearly identified there was a shortcoming in the industry where specific broking services were provided to specific sectors. So professional indemnity insurance or was one of those policies that really wasn't. It was still growing in the industry in Australia, so it wasn't having a lot of traction within brokers. Brokers were fairly scared of getting involved in it because it had a level of complexity to the placement of insurance, which has can have a huge impact on a broking firm, particularly through professional services and providing the incorrect advice of that product. But since 2000, that product's developed further. And so we found earlier in the piece that it was our time and we had the level of expertise to be able to grasp in that area and then develop a standing within the market on that. And since then, there's been other brokers gravitating towards that sector. So there's a lot more brokers that are now involved. Here to say, though, there's actually only a limited number of brokers that specifically specialise in that area.
So just for people like myself who don't work within the sector then, so in order for me to get a better idea of Willis Temby insurance brokers, do you consider yourselves sort of specialists in the areas of professional indemnity and liability, specializing in areas of resources or maritime, or how do you sort of identify your core services to people that might be looking for their own insurance needs?
Yeah, so if you took our core clientele, it's actually quite interesting. It's because it is complex risk. It is a commercial and corporate complex risk of, say, 10 plus employees who are requiring and actually appreciate dedicated advice and services. But it's over the journey, we've kind of gravitated very much towards the financial sectors because of professional indemnity insurance and the manner in which most of those sectors require that protection. And then as an offshoot of that, because we have always been in that complex risk area, we tend to get the harder to place business. And so we get people approaching us on all aspects, but the liability, the professional indemnity and the maritime sit in a specific sector. But because we're located in Western Australia and the amount of resource action that we have here in Western Australia, it means that we're heavily focused within that, and also the related sectors to that.
So, I think one of the things that a lot of us think of, not only just with like insurance or maybe even, possibly someone like a mortgage broker, is that we just go out and find, the most relevant or affordable policy, and it just kind of sits there until it needs to be renewed next year. When we're talking about things that you do differently compared to competitors in your space, you mentioned, positioning yourself or working with clients. What does that actually mean on a day-to-day basis? Because as I said, a lot of us just sort of think about taking it out of a policy and not really even looking at it again until we have to renew it a year later.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one. It's one of those little pitfalls that occur if, in effect, you haven't got the correct advisory services supporting your decision making. And so, what we look to do is education is the number one for us, is making sure that not only are you educating your team members to ensure that they're giving the correct advice and the most up-to-date feedback for their clients in relation to the market, but also the education of clients and the education of the broader community. But within the clients is making sure that they actually are providing the services where they can make a value decision on acquiring a policy and what that coverage is being afforded under that policy to them and what the cost associated with every aspect of that acquisition. So by just buying a policy, then shelving it and not having a clear understanding of it, it's not a good valued policy then. You're not understanding the value of what you're receiving out of it. And it's not until a time of a claim are you going to understand the true value of that policy.
Mm. And so is there anything happening more at an industry level worth mentioning to listeners today?
Oh, well, look, everyone would be experiencing it at the moment. In the current market, we've got we're in a hardening cycle, and the hardening cycle has come about through Lloyd's of London cracking down on poor performing risks. Lloyd's of London are being a big supporter of the Australian market over a long period of time. And Lloyd's have more recently done a review internally which has meant that they've pulled back on certain industries. They've pulled back on the capacity to be able to write high limits, or they'll put restrictions on the ability to write business and put exclusions and conditions over the policy. But also, importantly, they're increasing rates and premiums, which are having a significant impact on everybody within Australia at the moment. And it's not just now limited to Lloyd's of London, it's actually now extended out to Australian insurers, also implementing a correction within their book. And that's having some significant impact on businesses. And you would say that, you know, if people, listeners are aware of the Greensill Capital collapse, which is more recent issue in the headlines, is that's a direct example of the general insurance industry heavily influencing viability of business through the ability for that company to obtain insurances.
Interesting. Okay. Well, Brett, we're getting towards the end of our chat today. Before we finish off, is there anything that you haven't had a chance to address or would like to make mention of?
One of the things, I suppose, is that we as an industry are heading into coming out of the Haynes Royal Commission. And one of those is that our sector is under the spotlight. It's as a big advocate for our industry and the continuation of having intermediated services to protect the consumer, I just see it's such an importance for the industry and the regulators to embrace a collaborative position in being able to continue protection for consumers and to continue the viability of our industry. It's actually under a lot of pressure at the moment, and it would be good that this collaborative view continues, and because we can both coexist. And it's a time to evolve and remain relevant.
Well, Brett, thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Jesse.
This has been a production of the Australian Business Executive, a division of Romulus Rising Proprietary Limited. All rights reserved. You can stay up to date with the Australian Business Executive, including our magazines, podcasts and videos, by visiting www.theabe.com.au and clicking on subscribe.